In the trash bin under the sink lay my grandchildren's toys and our family photo albums. I'd come to fix a faucet, only to discover our entire history thrown out like garbage. Only money matters, Dad, my daughter explained, and I felt like an idiot for not understanding that. Her answer was supposed to teach me a lesson, a single, comprehensive one about what place I hold in her new world. And the most valuable lessons often come wrapped in the deepest pain. Perfect. The lesson would go both ways. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I pulled into her driveway and grabbed my phone, hitting FaceTime. The small wrapped gift on my passenger seat caught my eye, a model airplane kit for Tommy. At 8 years old, he was developing that curiosity about how things worked, and I loved nurturing that spark. "Hey, Dad!" Her face appeared on screen, but I could hear the echo of a large room behind her, voices in the background. "You made it!" "Just pulled up. Remind me again what's going on with the faucet?" "It's been dripping nonstop since yesterday morning. Really annoying. Probably just needs a washer or something simple, you know?" Her voice had that practiced casualness she used when asking for favors. "I'm already at the studio. Left the door unlocked for you." Of course she did. 23 years of me, dropping everything to fix her problems, and she couldn't even wait to greet me properly. "Is Tommy around? I brought him something." "Oh, he's at his other grandmother's for the weekend. Some museum thing." The dismissal in her voice stung. "Just leave it wherever." I stepped inside their house, my toolbox in one hand, phone in the other. The marble countertops gleamed, $12,000 of my retirement money that I'd installed myself. "Okay, I'm in the kitchen now. Before I start, I need to shut off the water valves under the sink." "Perfect. Thanks again, Dad. You're literally saving my life here." I knelt down and opened the cabinet door beneath the sink. The smell hit me immediately, that sour garbage odor, but then my eyes focused and my world tilted. Crammed into the black plastic waste bin were toys I recognized with painful clarity. The red fire truck I'd driven 3 hours to find for Tommy's 4th birthday. A stuffed elephant that had been his constant companion. And beneath them, photo albums with spines I knew by heart. Family Christmases, Tommy's birthdays, his baseball games, family gatherings. "Dad? You still there?" My throat felt tight. "Yeah, What are all these things doing in the garbage?" "What things?" I could hear her attention drifting, probably watching the yoga instructor. "Tommy's toys, our family photo albums, they're all in the trash bin under your sink." "Oh, that stuff." Her voice carried no emotion whatsoever. "Yeah, I've been meaning to take that out to the big bin. We're decluttering, you know? Getting rid of things that just take up space. But these are family memories, Tommy's favorite toys." "Dad, he's 8 now. He doesn't play with those baby toys anymore. And honestly, we don't have room for a bunch of old photo albums when everything's digital now." I stared at the bin, my hands trembling slightly. "I don't understand," I managed, my voice barely steady. "Even if you don't want them anymore, you could have given these to me. I would have kept them. These memories mean something, at least to me." "Oh." There was a pause, and I could hear her shifting around. "I honestly didn't even think about that. Look, Dad, you're making this into a way bigger deal than it needs to be. It's just stuff. Just stuff." The fire truck I'd spent 3 stores searching for because Tommy had seen one exactly like it in a book. The photo album from his first Christmas where he'd reached for the camera with those tiny, perfect fingers. "Just stuff?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "These are memories of your son, my grandson. This is our family." "Dad, seriously, you're being dramatic. Tommy won't even remember half these toys in a year. And we have thousands of photos on our phones now. Why do we need dusty old albums taking up space?" Something cold settled in my chest. When had I become dramatic for caring about the moments that mattered? Because some things shouldn't live on a phone screen. Because holding something real, something that was there during the actual moment. "God, Dad, you sound like Grandpa with his vinyl records and newspaper clippings." Her voice carried that edge I'd been hearing more often lately, that dismissive tone that made me feel ancient and irrelevant. "The world moves on. We can't keep everything just because it makes us feel warm and fuzzy." Feel warm and fuzzy. As if love for family was some kind of outdated sentiment. "I'm not asking you to keep everything. I'm asking why you couldn't think to offer these to the person who gave them meaning in the first place. Because I have a million things to think about every day, and honestly, Dad, sorting through old toys to see what might make you nostalgic isn't exactly high on my priority list. The words hit like a physical blow, not high on her priority list. I knelt there on her kitchen floor, surrounded by the debris of what I thought mattered, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Listen, I said carefully, maybe I'm old fashioned, but when I was growing up, family meant something more than convenience. Oh, please don't start with the when I was your age lecture. This isn't about family, Dad. It's about being practical. It's about not letting sentiment cloud your judgment about what actually has value. There it was, the word that had been lurking beneath this entire conversation. Value, I repeated slowly. Yes, value. Look, I know you get attached to things, but at the end of the day, only money matters. These toys aren't worth anything. The albums aren't worth anything. They're just taking up space that could be used for things that actually improve our lives. Only money matters. The words hung between us like a chasm. Everything I'd thought I knew about my daughter, about what I'd raised her to value, crumbled in that moment. Dad? You still there? The instructor is giving me dirty looks. I couldn't speak. 20 years of birthday mornings, Christmas excitement, bedtime stories, first steps captured in those worthless albums. Thousands of hours spent teaching her that love was measured in moments, not money. And somehow, somewhere along the way, I'd failed completely. Look, I really have to go. Just fix the faucet, okay? Thanks, Dad. The screen went dark. I sat there in the silence of her pristine kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand. The marble countertops gleamed around me, $12,000 of my retirement money that apparently did have value. But the memories of why I'd installed them, the joy on her face when she'd first seen them, the pride I'd felt in creating something beautiful for my daughter, that was just sentiment clouding my judgment. Slowly, carefully, I reached into the garbage bin and pulled out what could be saved. The fire truck was scratched but intact. A few photo albums had coffee grounds on the covers but were otherwise fine. Tommy's stuffed elephant was slightly damp but salvageable. I set them on the counter like rescued survivors. Then I turned to the faucet. My toolbox lay open, wrenches and washers arranged with the precision of 4 decades in construction. I could fix this in 15 minutes. Replace the valve seat, tighten the packing nut, test the water pressure. It was simple work, the kind of problem solving that had defined my life. I picked up my adjustable wrench and positioned it around the packing nut. The familiar weight felt right in my hands. I started to turn it counterclockwise, muscle memory guiding the motion. 1/4 turn. The drippings slowed slightly. My hands stopped. I stared at the wrench, frozen mid-turn. Why was I fixing this? So she could have one less problem to worry about while she dismissed everything I valued as clutter? So she could save the money it would cost to call a real plumber, money that actually mattered, unlike the grandfather who provided free labor? Slowly, deliberately, I loosened the nut back to where it had been. The dripping resumed its steady rhythm. Then I set the wrench back down. For the first time in my life, I looked at a broken thing and decided it could stay broken. I packed my tools methodically, each one returning to its designated place. The rescued items went into a grocery bag I found under the sink. A different bag in a different cabinet, far from the garbage that had held them. I walked to the front door, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. At the threshold, I paused and looked back at the kitchen. The faucet continued its steady drip, a metronome marking time in a house where only money mattered. The sound followed me all the way to my truck. The call came at 4:17 p.m., just as I was sitting down with my coffee and the salvaged photo album spread across my kitchen table. Her name flashed on my phone screen, and something in my chest tightened. Dad? Her voice had lost all traces of the casual dismissal from this morning. Now there was irritation, sharp and immediate. Did you actually fix the faucet? I took a slow sip of coffee, looking down at a photo of Tommy's second birthday. His face was smeared with chocolate cake, pure joy captured in time. No, I said simply. The silence stretched between us for several heartbeats. What do you mean, no? You said you'd fix it. I just got back from yoga and the dripping is driving me insane. It's exactly the same as this morning. I could hear frustration building in her voice, the kind of barely contained anger that comes when someone doesn't perform their expected role. I started to fix it, I said, my tone remaining calm, but then I changed my mind. Changed your mind? Dad, what are you talking about? You drove all the way over there to fix it. Actually, I drove over there because my daughter called and asked for help, but apparently we remembered that conversation very differently. I realized I had other things that were higher priority. I used her phrase deliberately, and from the sharp intake of breath on the other end, she caught it. Are you are you mad about the stuff in the garbage? Seriously? You're going to act like a child because I threw away some old toys? Some old toys. The red fire truck sat on my table now, its paint chipped but still bright. Tommy's fingerprints were probably still embedded in those tiny wheel wells. I'm not mad, I said, and it was true. Mad was too small a word for what had shifted inside me. I'm just reassessing my priorities. Dad, this is ridiculous. You're being petty. It's a 5-minute repair job. 5 minutes. She was right about that. 5 minutes to fix her problem, to make her life easier, to ensure she didn't have to spend money on a plumber. 5 minutes of free labor from the man whose grandson's toys weren't worth 5 minutes of consideration. You're absolutely right. It would take about 5 minutes. So why didn't you do it? I could hear another voice in the background, deeper, male. Her husband was home. Because, I said carefully, I'm trying to focus on things that have actual value. More muffled conversation on her end. I caught fragments. Just being stubborn. Call someone else. Always been dramatic. Dad, listen. Her voice took on that patient Aloika, condescending tone people use when they think they're dealing with someone unreasonable. I know you're upset about what I said this morning, but you're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Look, if this is about money now, I'll pay you for the repair. How's $50? I didn't realize you expected payment. She thought this was about money. She actually believed that after her lecture about how only money mattered, I had decided to start charging her for repairs. The complete misunderstanding of what had broken between us was almost breathtaking. $50. She was offering to pay me $50 to fix the faucet I'd originally agreed to fix for free. In the kitchen I'd renovated for free. In the house I'd helped them afford. That's very generous, I said, but I'm not available. Not available? Dad, you're retired? What could you possibly have going on that's more important than helping your family? The question hung in the air. What did I have going on? What was more important than dropping everything to solve her problems? I'm learning about priorities, I told her. Apparently, it's a lesson I need. The background voice grew louder, more insistent. I heard her cover the phone, but pieces of the conversation bled through. Just get someone. Ridiculous. His age. Fine, she said when she came back on the line. Fine. I'll call a real plumber. And when they charge me $200 for a 5-minute job, I hope you're happy with yourself. $200 for a 5-minute job. I wondered if she heard the irony in her own words. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said. You're very good at determining what has value. She hung up without saying goodbye. And I set the phone down and returned to the photo albums. Here was Tommy's first Christmas, reaching for ornaments on a tree. Here was last Easter, egg hunt in their backyard. Here was a family that used to exist before everything became a transaction. The photos didn't argue with me. They didn't justify or rationalize or offer to pay me for my emotions. They just were. I was washing dishes when I heard the car doors slam in my driveway. The sound was sharp, urgent, different from the usual casual visits. I dried my hands and glanced at the clock. 11:43 p.m. Through the kitchen window, I could see two figures hurrying up my front walkway. The doorbell rang 3 times in quick succession. Dad! Her voice was tight with panic as I opened the door. Behind her stood Mike, looking haggard and irritated. Thank God you're awake. We have a massive crisis on our hands. I stepped aside to let them in, noting the stress lines around her eyes, the way Mike kept checking his phone. What's going on? The insurance company is threatening to deny our claim on the roof damage from last month's storm. They're saying the documentation is incomplete and they need proof that all the repair work was done to code. She ran her hands through her hair. They want blueprints, permits, contractor licenses. Everything from when we did the addition 3 years ago. The addition I'd designed, the permits I'd helped navigate, the inspections I'd coordinated because I knew the local codes inside and out after 40 years in construction. And they need everything by 9 a.m. tomorrow, or they're closing the file, Mike added, his voice tight with frustration. We're talking about $37,000 in damages, Dad. $37,000. I could see the desperation in both their faces. This wasn't a problem money could solve quickly, at least not at 11:43 p.m. with a 9 a.m. deadline. Plus, she continued, Tommy's school called. There's been some kind of water main break, and they're closing early tomorrow. Someone needs to pick him up at noon, but I have to be at the insurance office, and Mike has back-to-back client meetings he can't cancel. I looked at them both, seeing the assumption in their eyes. Dad will fix this. Dad always fixes everything. Of course I'll get Tommy, I said immediately. That's never a question. We'll have lunch, maybe go to that science museum he's been wanting to visit. Relief flooded her face. Thank you, Dad. And about the insurance documents? You'll need to hire a lawyer, I said simply. Someone who specializes in property insurance claims. The relief vanished. What? A lawyer, I repeated. They'll know exactly what documentation the insurance company needs and how to present it properly. Mike stepped forward, his face reddening. A lawyer? Do you have any idea what lawyers charge for emergency document prep? We're looking at $5,000, maybe $6,000 minimum. I nodded thoughtfully. That does sound expensive. But then again, you've made it clear that only money matters, so this seems like exactly the kind of problem money should solve. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad, she said carefully, you know this house inside and out. You have all the permits, you know which contractors we used, you understand the codes better than any lawyer. This would take you maybe 3 hours to sort out. You're absolutely right, I agreed. 3 hours, maybe 4. At current legal rates for emergency consultation, that would be, let's see, $400 an hour seems fair for my expertise. $1,600, cash up front. Mike exploded. $1,600? Are you out of your goddamn mind? I turned to him calmly. Actually, that's quite reasonable for emergency construction consulting. Most firms would charge double for same-day service. You're not a firm. You're her father. And she's made it very clear how she values that relationship, I said quietly. So let's treat this as a business transaction. Much cleaner that way. I watched something shift in her expression, a dawning realization that the man who had always been her safety net was no longer automatically available. Dad, please. This is our home we're talking about. The same home I helped you buy, renovate, and maintain for 3 years without charging a dime, I said. But apparently, that was just me being impractical and sentimental. Mike was pacing now, his voice getting louder. This is insane. You can't just suddenly start charging family for help. Why not? I asked genuinely. Wasn't it your idea that only money matters? I'm just adapting to your philosophy. The look that passed between them was electric. She spun toward him, something dangerous flashing in her eyes. Your idea, she hissed. That's not, Mike stammered. I never said to treat your father like... You absolutely did. Her voice was rising now. You're the one who said we need to stop being so sentimental about stuff that doesn't have real value. You're the one who said Dad was being ridiculous about those old photos and toys. I watched this revelation unfold with quiet interest. The puppet master was finally being revealed. Look, Mike said desperately, can we just focus on the problem here? We need those documents, and hiring a lawyer is going to cost us a fortune. Then I suggest you start making phone calls, I said. But just so we're clear, Tommy will always be welcome here, no charge. Some relationships actually don't have price tags. I moved toward the door, a clear signal that our business was concluded. This is unbelievable, Mike muttered. Your own father is holding you hostage over some stupid argument about garbage. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. No, I said quietly. I'm just finally speaking a language you both understand. They left without another word, but through my window I could see them arguing in the driveway. Sharp gestures, raised voices, the kind of fight that reveals cracks in a foundation. Sometimes the most important construction work happens when you stop building and start letting things fall apart on their own. Tommy's eyes lit up when he saw me standing outside his school at noon, just as they always did. 8 years old, gap-toothed grin, backpack almost as big as he was. "Grandpa, Mom said you were coming." He ran straight into my arms, and for a moment the weight of the last week lifted from my shoulders. "Are we going somewhere fun?" "Absolutely. How about that burger place with the arcade? The one with the robot that brings your food?" His excitement was infectious, bubbling over as we drove across town. He chattered about his science project, about how his teacher said his volcano was the best in the class, about how he wanted to build a real rocket someday. "You know what, buddy? I think you'd make an excellent engineer," I told him as we slid into a booth at Chuck's Family Fun Center. The robot waiter rolled up to take our orders, and Tommy nearly fell out of his seat with delight. For an hour, I watched my grandson be exactly what he was, a curious, joyful 8-year-old boy who thought the world was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. We talked about space, about dinosaurs, about whether robots could ever really think like people. His mind was sharp, always asking why and how, never satisfied with simple answers. This was what I'd been fighting for, not the toys themselves, but what they represented. The love, the memories, the connection between generations that couldn't be reduced to a price tag. When we got back to my house, Tommy headed straight for the bathroom while I started making his favorite snack, peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles with the crusts off. That's when I heard the gasp from the living room. "Grandpa! Grandpa! Come here!" I found him on the floor, clutching his red fire truck and stuffed elephant, his face transformed with pure joy. "Bongo! And my fire truck! I thought they were lost forever." He hugged the elephant tight, then looked up at me with confusion and wonder. "Mom said I was too old for these now. She said I didn't care about them anymore." My heart clenched. The casual lie, told so easily to justify throwing away what mattered to him. "What do you think, buddy? Are you too old for them?" He shook his head vigorously. "No way. Bongo goes everywhere with me. Well, he used to. And this fire truck," he ran it across the coffee table, making siren sounds, "is still the coolest truck ever. See how the ladder extends? And the doors really open." I knelt beside him, watching him rediscover treasures he'd thought were gone. This was what his mother had called clutter. This was what didn't matter, according to her new philosophy. My phone rang. Mike's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Tommy was showing me how Mr. Peanuts could still do his special trick, standing on his head when you squeezed his belly just right. But something in the persistence of the ringing made me pick up. "We're screwed." Mike's voice was tight with panic. "The lawyers couldn't pull it together in time. The insurance company closed our file at 9:01 this morning. $37,000. Gone. Just gone." I watched Tommy arrange an elaborate rescue scene with his fire truck and elephant. Bongo was trapped on top of a couch cushion, and the fire truck was coming to save him. "I see," I said calmly. "You see?" Mike's voice cracked with disbelief. "That's it? You see? Do you have any idea what you've cost us? What your stubborn pride has done to this family?" Tommy looked up at the sharp tone coming through the phone. "Is that Daddy? Is he okay?" "He's fine, buddy. Just some grown-up stress. Keep playing." "Listen to me," Mike continued, his voice getting more desperate. "We can still fix this. The insurance company said they'll reopen the case if we can get a certified construction expert to validate the work. You could still save this situation." Tommy had moved on to setting up a tea party for Bongo. The elephant sat at the little table I'd made years ago, having an animated conversation about space rockets. "Mike," I said quietly, "I'll have Tommy back by 6 tonight. You can pick him up then, or I can drop him off." "Are you even listening to me? We're talking about our house, our financial future." "I'm listening, and I heard you perfectly clearly last night when you said I was holding my own daughter hostage. I heard you when you called this a stupid argument about garbage, so I think we understand each other perfectly." Silence on the other end. "Then what do you want? Money? An apology? What will it take?" Tommy was now having Bongo and the fire truck share the peanut butter sandwich I'd made, carefully breaking off tiny pieces for each of them. "I don't want anything from you, Mike. I want my grandson to know that some things in this world don't have price tags. I want him to understand that love isn't a transaction." "You're destroying us over toys and photo albums." "No, I said, watching Tommy's pure joy as he played with his worthless treasures. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided that only money matters. I'm just no longer pretending otherwise. I hung up. Tommy looked over at me. Grandpa, why does Daddy sound so mad? I sat down on the floor beside him, picking up one of the tiny sandwich pieces he'd prepared for Bongo. Just some grown-up problems, buddy. Nothing for you to worry about. He shrugged and went back to his game, making Bongo dance around the fire truck. My phone buzzed with text after text. Mike, my daughter, Mike again. I turned it face down and didn't read them. For the next 2 hours, we played. Fire truck rescues, space adventures with Bongo, building block towers that reached toward the ceiling. Tommy was completely absorbed, completely content, playing with toys his mother had deemed worthless. At 5:30, I started gathering his backpack. Time to head home, buddy. Can Bongo come with me this time? I looked at the stuffed elephant, thinking about the garbage bin where I'd found him just days ago. I think Bongo would love that. I pulled into their driveway at exactly 6 p.m., Tommy chattering excitedly in the back seat about his day. Bongo sat securely in his lap, and the fire truck was tucked safely in his backpack. Through the kitchen window, I could see two figures moving around, sharp, agitated gestures that suggested the argument had been going on for a while. Thanks for the best day ever, Grandpa, Tommy said as we walked up to the front door. Anytime, buddy, anytime. The door opened before I could knock. My daughter stood there, her eyes red-rimmed, her face drawn with exhaustion and something else, maybe the first glimmer of understanding about what she'd lost. Hi, Dad. Behind her, Mike appeared, his tie loosened, his shirt wrinkled, looking like a man who'd spent the day watching his world fall apart. His eyes immediately locked onto the stuffed elephant in Tommy's arms, and I saw something ugly flash across his face. Tommy, go wash up for dinner, she said softly. But I want to show you Bongo. Tommy held up his elephant proudly. Mike's face darkened, and when he spoke, his voice carried a venom that made my chest tighten with protective anger. Where the hell did that come from? The sharpness in his voice made Tommy step back, clutching Bongo tighter. I felt my hands clench involuntarily. This was my grandson, an innocent child, and this man was directing his rage at him. Language, Mike, my daughter said quietly, but there was exhaustion in her voice as if she'd been saying it all day. Language? We just lost $37,000 because your father decided to play games, and you're worried about language? I watched Tommy's confusion turn to fear, his small body shrinking against my leg. This was what their marriage had become, a powder keg where even a child's joy could spark an explosion. I put my hand gently on Tommy's shoulder. Why don't you go get washed up like your mom said, buddy? The grown-ups need to talk. Tommy looked between us, sensing the tension, then hurried down the hallway with Bongo tucked under his arm. The moment he was out of sight, Mike exploded. I hope you're proud of yourself. $37,000. Gone, because you were too stubborn and petty to help your own family. I stood in their entryway, calm as still water, and let him rage. There was something almost therapeutic about watching him reveal his true nature. The mask was finally off, and the ugly reality underneath was on full display. He paced as he spoke, his movements sharp and aggressive, like a caged animal looking for something to attack. My daughter stood against the wall, her arms crossed defensively, and I realized she was afraid of him. Not physically, perhaps, but emotionally. Afraid of his anger, his blame, his need to make everyone else responsible for his failures. We hired the most expensive lawyers in the city. Emergency rates, weekend fees, rush documentation. It cost us $8,000, and they still couldn't piece together what you knew by heart. The insurance company wouldn't even look at what they prepared. $8,000. I did the math quickly. They'd spent more on lawyers than I'd asked for in consulting fees and got nothing for it. The irony was delicious, but I kept my expression neutral. Mike, my daughter started, her voice small and tired. No, he spun toward her with such violence that she actually flinched. Don't you dare take his side now. This is on him. All of it. I watched this performance with the detached interest of someone observing a train wreck. Terrible, but fascinating in its inevitability. Mike was crumbling, and instead of taking responsibility, he was lashing out at everyone around him. Classic behavior of a man who'd never been held accountable for anything in his life. Actually, I said quietly, I think it's time we talked about whose idea this really was. Something shifted in the room. My daughter's eyes sharpened, and I saw her spine straighten slightly. Mike's bluster faltered for just a moment. He could sense the change in atmosphere, like an animal sensing a storm. What's that supposed to mean? Mike demanded, but there was uncertainty creeping into his voice now. I looked directly at my daughter, ignoring him completely. It was time to strip away the last of the pretenses. Tell me, sweetheart, when did you first start thinking that only money matters? When did you first decide that family memories were just clutter taking up space? She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes moving between Mike and me. I could see the wheels turning, the connections finally being made that should have been made years ago. Mike shifted uncomfortably. He knew what was coming. She stopped. Started again. It wasn't. It was after you married him, wasn't it? I continued gently, my voice taking on the tone I'd used when she was little and had done something wrong, not angry, just disappointed. Because I remember a little girl who kept every drawing she ever made, every card I ever gave her, every photo of every moment we shared. I saw her eyes fill with tears, and for a moment I glimpsed the daughter I'd raised, the one who used to save butterfly wings between the pages of books, the one who'd cried when we had to throw away her broken dollhouse because she said it still had feelings. Mike's face was getting redder, and I could see him calculating, trying to find a way to turn this back around. Mike's face was getting redder. This is ridiculous. You're trying to turn this into something it's not. Am I? I asked, because from where I stand, it looks like you convinced my daughter to throw away everything that couldn't be converted into cash value. And when that didn't work fast enough, you had her throw away the man who'd been supporting you both for years. Supporting us? Mike laughed harshly. You mean interfering? You mean making her dependent on you so she could never make her own decisions? That's when my daughter found her voice. Stop it. Her words were quiet, but sharp as broken glass, and they cut through Mike's desperation like a blade through paper. Just stop it, Mike. He turned to her, and I saw something in his face that I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. He was losing control of the narrative, losing his grip on the woman he'd spent years molding into his vision of practicality. What? He never made me dependent on anything. You did. Her voice was getting stronger with each word, years of suppressed realization flooding out like water through a broken dam. You're the one who said we should take the money for the down payment. You're the one who said it was stupid to pay for repairs when Dad would do them for free. You're the one who convinced me that accepting his help was just being practical. I watched this revelation unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This was my daughter finally seeing clearly, but it had taken the loss of $37,000 and the near destruction of her relationship with me for her to get there. Mike's face cycled through surprise, denial, and finally a desperate kind of anger, the rage of a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. That's not, I never said. But she was on a roll now, 20 years of conditioning finally breaking apart. And when I started feeling guilty about how much we were taking from him, you're the one who told me not to be sentimental. You said family was family, and that's what parents are for. She was standing straighter now, years of suppressed realization flooding out. And when he found those toys and albums in the garbage, you're the one who told me to tell him that only money matters. I never told you to say that. You didn't have to. She was almost shouting now. I've been listening to your lectures about practical value and emotional overhead for 3 years. I threw away my son's toys because I'd started seeing them through your eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Mike stood there, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling around him. I cleared my throat softly, and both of them turned to look at me. The sound cut through their emotional chaos like a church bell calling people back to reality. The interesting thing about all this, I said, my voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd finally accepted the truth about his situation, is that I would have helped you anyway, even after the cruel things you said, even after you threw away 20 years of love like it was garbage. I could see my daughter's face crumple slightly at these words. Good. She needed to understand the magnitude of what she'd lost. If you had just asked, really asked, with a little humility and respect, I would have spent all night getting those documents together. I would have called in favors, pulled strings, done whatever it took. Mike's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I realized he was finally understanding the scope of his miscalculation. He'd burned a bridge he could never rebuild, and it was going to cost him far more than $37,000. But instead, you demanded, you expected, you treated me like hired help while simultaneously refusing to pay for the service. I shook my head slowly, letting my disappointment show for the first time. And when I finally started charging you the same rates you pay strangers, you called me crazy. I let that sink in for a moment, watching Mike's face as he processed the reality that his own arrogance had cost him everything. This was what victory looked like. Not celebration, but the quiet satisfaction of watching someone reap exactly what they'd sown. I turned toward the hallway where Tommy had disappeared. "Tommy!" I called. "Come say goodbye to Grandpa." He came running, Bongo still in his arms. "Goodbye already? But you just got here." I knelt down to his level. "I know, buddy, but I wanted to make sure you got home safe with Bongo." I hugged him tight, breathing in that little boy smell of playground dirt and innocence. "Grandpa?" he whispered in my ear. "Are you and Mommy and Daddy fighting?" I pulled back to look at his serious 8-year-old face. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, Tommy, but you know what never changes?" "What?" "How much Grandpa loves you. That's always the same, no matter what." He smiled and hugged me again. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking in protest, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear my daughter crying softly and Mike starting another desperate justification that no one was listening to. The sound felt like the death rattle of a relationship that had been dying for months. I paused at the threshold and looked back one final time. My daughter was collapsed against the wall, her face in her hands. Mike was pacing again, gesturing wildly as he spoke to no one in particular. And somewhere down the hallway, I could hear Tommy playing with Bongo, making little airplane sounds as he made the elephant fly through the air. This house, the house I'd helped them buy, the kitchen I'd renovated, the problems I'd solved for 3 years, suddenly felt like a tomb, a monument to good intentions gone wrong and love that had been treated as a transaction once too often. "You know what the real tragedy is?" I said to the room, my voice carrying clearly through the chaos. I thought I was raising a daughter who understood that love isn't a transaction. Turns out I just hadn't charged her enough to realize what it was worth. My daughter looked up at me through her tears, and for just a moment, I saw the little girl who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, believing I could fix anything. But some things once broken can't be repaired. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. And some lessons can only be learned through loss. I walked to my truck without looking back, my footsteps echoing in the still evening air. Sometimes the most important construction work is demolition, tearing down what's broken so something real can be built in its place. And sometimes you have to walk away from the wreckage to realize that you were never the one who needed fixing. The next morning, I was drinking coffee on my porch when I saw a familiar car pull into my driveway. My daughter got out alone. No Mike, no Tommy, and walked slowly toward my front door. I didn't move from my chair. She stood at the bottom of my porch steps, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes and the kind of exhaustion that comes from a sleepless night of hard truths. "I spent all night thinking about what you said." I sipped my coffee and waited. About how I used to save everything. About how I used to care about things that couldn't be converted into cash value. Her voice was hoarse. "You were right. I did become someone I don't recognize." The morning air was crisp, autumn settling in around us like a blanket. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, the sound of innocence that both of us had forgotten how to protect. "And," I asked, "and I don't know if I can fix what I broke." She climbed the first step, then stopped. "Mike's already talking about lawyers, about custody arrangements, about dividing assets. Everything's about money with him, even our son." I set down my coffee cup. "What about you? What's it about for you?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the porch boards between us. "I want my son to know his grandfather. I want him to grow up understanding that some things matter more than their price tag. I want Her voice cracked. I want to remember who I was before I let someone else define what had value. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the calculated expressions I'd grown so tired of seeing. But all I saw was a woman who'd finally looked in the mirror and didn't like what was looking back. Tommy can visit anytime, I said. And me? The question hung between us like a bridge half built, waiting to see if it would hold weight or collapse under the first real test. That depends on whether you're asking as my daughter or as someone who needs something fixed. She climbed another step. I'm asking as someone who threw away the most important relationship in her life because she forgot that love isn't a transaction. I stood up slowly, my coffee cup still in my hands. Love isn't a transaction, I agreed. But trust has to be earned back. Respect has to be rebuilt. And understanding. I looked at her directly. Understanding has to be paid for with humility. She nodded, tears starting to flow freely now. I know, and I know it might take years. But Dad, I miss you. Not your help, not your solutions to my problems. I miss you. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked down at my daughter, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. Some bridges can be rebuilt, but only if both sides are willing to do the work, and only if everyone understands that the new bridge won't look anything like the old one. Sometimes that's exactly what makes it stronger. Come inside, I said finally. Let's talk about what rebuilding looks like. She climbed the rest of the steps, and for the first time in months, I held the door open for my daughter. Not because she expected it, but because she'd finally learned to appreciate it. If you enjoyed this story, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And when you're ready for the next story, just click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.